The storm split the sea with thunder, lightning striking like furious arrows across the black sky. On jagged rocks, Selene stood, her silver hair plastered to her face, her song caught between anguish and longing. The curse weighed heavy, her voice chained by fate, yet in that moment, she sang with defiance, the notes trembling with power. Adrian stood at the shore, his eyes wide, his voice torn between fear and wonder as he whispered, "Her voice is breaking the storm." The waves roared, the wind screamed, and the night burned with magic too wild to cage. The sea itself seemed to bow before the call, and Selene knew her voice had finally reached the one who could unbind her soul. The storm calmed, but Selene fell to her knees, her voice fading into a whisper as exhaustion claimed her. She pressed her hand to the wet stone, trembling, whispering to herself, "He heard me." Adrian remained frozen on the sand, his heart racing, as though he had been struck by lightning. He had heard songs before, tales of voices that lured sailors to their doom. Yet this felt different, terrifying and beautiful. His lips moved again, repeating her name though he had never been told it. The silence that followed was not peace, but anticipation, the air thick with an unseen weight. Both knew the world had shifted, and neither would ever walk away untouched. Selene staggered back from the rocks, her feet slicing on the jagged surface, yet she barely noticed the pain. Her mind echoed with the sound of his voice, the way he whispered her name without knowing it. The curse had not shattered, not yet, but it trembled like fragile glass. Adrian waited closer, waves tugging at his boots, his breath uneven as he called, "Who are you?" His voice carried no malice, only the weight of discovery. Selene turned, her eyes filled with defiance and sorrow. She whispered into the wind, her words meant more for herself than him, the one who cannot love. The sea churned as though echoing her truth. The sea withdrew in uneasy silence, and for the first time Selene felt its pull loosen. A figure emerged from the mist, cloaked in dark robes, the mentor who had warned her of this very night. Elias said, "You have set fate in motion." His voice carried a sorrow that mirrored her own. Adrian's head turned sharply, confusion painted on his face, but he remained silent. Selene clenched her fists, her heart rebelling against chains that bound her. She wanted freedom, yet the fear of loss pierced sharper than the rocks beneath her. The tide whispered of choices not yet made, of a love too dangerous to hold, and a curse that had only begun to stir awake. Selene stood frozen between two worlds, the sea that had chained her and the mortal who could break her. Adrian's gaze lingered on her face, full of questions he dared not voice. Elias's eyes burned with warning, but his silence spoke louder than any command. Selene whispered to herself, "Love is a blade," as her fingers brushed the edge of her gown. The world hushed, as though holding its breath for her answer. Adrian stepped closer, defying both sea and storm, his hand almost reaching hers. In that heartbeat, the curse shimmered like a thin veil between them, fragile yet dangerous. The choice was not yet made, but destiny's shadow already loomed heavy. The morning sun bled through heavy clouds, turning the waves into molten silver. Selene sat on a tide-worn boulder, her hands tracing the cracks as if reading destiny etched in stone. Adrian watched from a cautious distance, torn between awe and fear, whispering, "You are not meant for this world." Selene's lips trembled with a bitter smile, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the sea held her heart hostage. Elias lingered behind them, silent, the weight of unspoken prophecy pressing his shoulders down. The silence between them was alive with questions too heavy for words. The tide carried whispers of freedom, yet the chains within Selene's chest clanged louder than the surf. The wind pulled at Selene's gown as though urging her back to the water, but she stayed anchored in place. Adrian stepped closer, his boots sinking into the sand, his voice sharp with disbelief as he asked, "Why does the sea obey your song?" She turned slowly, her silver eyes haunted, replying softly, "Because it owns me." Adrian faltered, the truth striking deeper than any blade. Elias shook his head, his tone low as he warned, "Every answer comes with a cost you may not wish to bear." Silence lingered, broken only by the cry of gulls circling overhead. Destiny had been spoken aloud, and none could deny the weight pressing closer with each passing moment. Selene turned away from them, stepping into the shallow surf where the waves kissed her ankles with icy devotion. Adrian followed, his voice breaking as he said, "I heard your name before I knew it. What binds me to you?" She stiffened, fear flashing across her face as she whispered, "A curse that destroys love before it lives." Elias pressed his palm against his brow, whispering into the wind. The prophecy unfolds faster than the sea's turning tide. The gulls scattered at his words, the sky dimming with a shadow that had no source. Adrian's hand stretched forward but stopped short, hovering inches from her arm. The distance between them burned with danger and longing both. Elias stepped forward, his robe dragging in wet sand, his voice breaking with urgency. "Selene, you must sever the bond before it roots too deep," he said, his eyes begging her. She turned sharply, silver hair whipping across her face, her tone laced with defiance as she whispered, "And live in silence forever." Adrian clenched his fists, torn between reason and desire, but he could not deny the ache in his chest. "Whatever fate binds you," Adrian said, "it binds me too." Elias groaned, knowing the storm ahead was greater than the one they had survived. The sea darkened, the air charged with the promise of turmoil, and destiny's noose drew tighter with each heartbeat. The tide surged higher, foam licking at their feet, carrying with it a whisper that only Selene could hear. She staggered back, pressing her hand against her chest as though the sea itself sought to reclaim her heart. Adrian caught her wrist gently, his touch trembling as he said, "You are not alone." The words were fragile but fierce, cutting through the storm of her doubts. Elias turned away, shadows consuming his expression, knowing what had begun could not be undone. Selene's lips parted, a confession trembling on her tongue, but the sea roared louder, drowning her voice. For the first time, the chains of her curse rattled, weaker, yet dangerous as ever. The air grew heavy, thick with a silence that felt more dangerous than any storm. Selene's gaze swept the horizon, but the unease coiled deep within her chest. From the cliffs above, a figure cloaked in obsidian descended slowly, eyes gleaming with hunger for power. Dorian's voice cut like sharpened steel as he said, "Your song awakens more than love, it awakens ruin." Adrian stepped in front of Selene, fists clenched, his voice rough with defiance, "Stay away from her." The words trembled against the vast sea wind. Elias tightened his grip on his staff, knowing the battle they feared had arrived sooner than fate allowed. The sea stirred, reflecting dread and destiny both. Dorian's smile was cold, his words dripping poison. "Did you think destiny would allow you to love freely?" he asked, stepping closer. Selene's breath faltered, yet she raised her chin, unwilling to show fear. Adrian's voice broke the silence. "Love is not yours to chain." Dorian's laugh echoed across the rocks, twisting like smoke. "Everything is mine when the curse is mine." The ground beneath them shuddered, cracks splitting the stones as if the earth bowed to his claim. Elias whispered under his breath, a chant of protection, but the magic trembled weakly against the shadow. The horizon seemed darker, as though night had returned early, swallowing the fragile dawn they once held. From the shadows behind Dorian stepped a familiar face, once adored and now lost. Lucien's eyes glimmered with torment, his voice low, broken. "Selene, I was meant to protect you, but I failed." Her breath caught, her heart splintering as past memories surged like crashing waves. Adrian's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at the betrayal wrapped in sorrow. Dorian sneered, "Even fallen heroes crave her song." Lucien's gaze burned with regret, yet darkness curled around him like chains. Elias whispered, "This is the cost of choices unmade." Selene felt the curse thrum violently, torn between a past that haunted and a present that demanded sacrifice. Love was becoming the sharpest wound. The air shimmered, and from its veil stepped a figure neither holy friend nor foe. Kaelen's form shifted, features bending like water, eyes unreadable as he said, "Trust is a dangerous game." Selene stiffened, her heart aching with confusion. Adrian snapped, Then choose your side, but Kaelen only smirked. Dorian's voice curled like smoke. Shapeshifters belong where power thrives. Elias raised his staff, voice hoarse. Deception is a blade that cuts all who wield it. The surf grew louder, waves battering the rocks as though the sea itself watched, judging. Selene's chest tightened, caught in a web of truths and lies, her fate woven tighter with every shifting shadow. Lightning split the horizon as voices clashed like steel. Selene's plea burst from her lips. Enough. This is not love, this is ruin. Adrian's hand hovered at her back, his touch steady but restrained. Dorian's laugh thundered, his words venomous. Your heart is my weapon, Selene. Lucien staggered, torn between guilt and the darkness chaining him, whispering, I never wanted this. Kaelen's smile faded, his shifting face betraying doubt. Elias pressed his staff into the ground, the earth glowing faintly as he roared, the prophecy is unraveling. Selene's chest heaved as she realized destiny was not a road to walk, but a storm to survive, and storms cared little for love. The sea recoiled as though bracing for the storm within their hearts. Elias raised his staff, light flickering weakly against the shadow creeping closer. He whispered, truth must be spoken before choice can be made. Selene turned, her silver hair clinging to her damp skin, eyes narrowed as if daring him to continue. Elias's voice cracked, your song is no curse, it is the key to breaking the ancient bond. But it demands a sacrifice, one heart surrendered to save the other. Adrian's breath caught, the weight of those words pressing into him like iron. Selene felt her chest constrict as destiny bared its fangs. The truth had been revealed, but hope came dressed as ruin. The wind howled, yet Selene's voice cut through it, trembling with both fear and desire. If sacrifice is the key, then what is freedom worth? Her words carried like shards of glass, sharp enough to wound all who heard. Adrian stepped forward, eyes burning. Freedom is nothing without you. His declaration struck her heart, but sorrow coiled deep within her chest. Elias lowered his gaze, knowing the path of love often led to ruin. Selene looked to the sea, where waves surged higher, as if the ocean itself demanded her answer. The choice loomed like a blade above them, love shimmering in its edge, sharp enough to sever worlds apart. Dorian stepped forward, eyes gleaming with cruel delight. A sacrifice? Then let me take what you cherish most, he sneered, his cloak whipping in the storm winds. Selene's chest tightened as he reached for Adrian. With sudden fury, she raised her hand, the sea roaring in response, waves slamming against the rocks. Adrian braced himself, voice rough but steady, you will never own her. Lightning illuminated Lucien, torn between loyalty and chains, his face fractured by guilt. Kaelen shifted forms at the edge, eyes unreadable, his smirk fading. Elias shouted over the storm, every choice awakens its cost. The battlefield was no longer fate's design, but Selene's heart laid bare. The waves struck, forcing Dorian back, yet his laughter echoed, promising he would not be denied. Selene staggered, drained by the force of her defiance. Adrian caught her arm, his touch steady, his words hushed, I will not let you break alone. Her breath shook as their eyes met, a tether forming stronger than chains. Elias grimaced, his staff flickering, every bond forged here will either save us or doom us. Lucien turned his face away, unable to meet her gaze, while Kaelen's features rippled as if mirroring the storm. The sea grew darker, its voice heavy with warning, as though it knew the balance of love and ruin had begun to collapse. Silence fell between crashes of thunder, a silence heavy with dread. Selene whispered, love was never meant for me, only loss. Adrian shook his head, his voice fierce, then I will carry that loss with you, not against you. His words struck her deeper than any blade. Elias's eyes dimmed, whispering, you defy prophecy itself. Dorian's laughter carried across the sea, mocking defiance only feeds the curse. Lucien's jaw clenched, torn between past devotion and present chains. Kaelen's eyes flickered, betraying a hidden choice not yet revealed. The sea surged violently, waves reaching higher than ever before. Destiny had been provoked, and love now stood as both shield and weapon. The storm eased suddenly, leaving an eerie stillness that pressed against their hearts. Kaelen's form flickered, settling into one face, his eyes sharp and full of hidden truths. "I was never your ally," he said, voice calm yet dangerous. Selene staggered back, betrayal slicing deeper than the sea's cold. Adrian snarled, stepping forward. "You played us." Kaelen tilted his head, a cruel smile twisting across shifting lips. "I played destiny. You were just pieces." Elias's voice trembled with fury. "The shapeshifter serves the curse, not the crown." Selen's chest ached, the betrayal not just of trust but of hope itself. The silence following his confession was heavier than thunder. Elias's voice cut the air like a blade. The curse was never born of hate, but of love twisted beyond repair. His words shattered the fragile silence. Selene's breath caught, her hands trembling as she whispered, "Then my voice. It was never meant to destroy." Adrian's hand hovered near hers, eyes locked with hers, steady and unyielding. Dorian's laughter echoed cruelly. "A bond forged in love is the very chain that drags you to ruin." Selene felt the sea roar inside her chest, the truth pulling at every fragile thread of her being. The revelation burned brighter than lightning. Her gift had always been a weapon of love, not its grave. Lucien stepped forward, shadows clinging to him like chains, his voice torn with guilt. "I was the first to bear the curse," he confessed, eyes locked on Selene. Her breath stilled, heart breaking under the weight of his words. Adrian's fists clenched, fury etched in every line of his face. Dorian smirked, savoring the pain. "A tragic hero, undone by love," he mocked. Elias whispered, "The curse travels through blood and choice alike." Lucien's voice shook. "I loved you once, Selene, and I lost myself to that love." Her heart cracked with the revelation, torn between sorrow and rage. Love was no longer a gift, it was a wound etched across generations. Selene's voice cracked, whispering to the wind, "Then the curse is bound to every heart that dares to love me." Adrian reached for her hand, fierce and unyielding. "Then let it bind us both." His words were fire against the storm, daring fate itself to strike. Elias's face drained of color, murmuring, "If you tether yourselves, one must fall." Dorian's grin widened, a sacrifice dressed as devotion. Delicious. Kaelen folded his arms, eyes glittering with cruel amusement. Lucien's gaze broke, sorrow pouring from him as though it might drown the cliffs. Selene's chest burned with a mix of terror and desire, knowing the line between salvation and ruin had vanished entirely. The sea raged, towering waves curling like claws, but it was the silence in Selene's heart that roared loudest. She realized the truth. Adrian's voice was not only her salvation, it was the curse's breaking point. Dorian shouted, his words jagged with fury. "If his voice unbinds you, it destroys me." Adrian's voice rose above the chaos, trembling but strong. "Then let my love be your freedom." Selene's knees weakened as power surged in her chest, the sea bending toward their joined voices. Elias fell to his knees, eyes wide in reverence. Lucien cried out in despair, and Kaelen's mask cracked with doubt. The twist had come. Love was not ruin, it was rebellion. The sea convulsed, waves towering like walls of glass ready to shatter. Dorian's cloak spread wide, shadows pouring from his hands as he screamed, "If I fall, I drag you all into the abyss." Selene's body trembled, her song quivering on her lips. Adrian gripped her hand, voice steady despite the fury around them, then let him drown in his own chains. Elias raised his staff, runes glowing faintly as he chanted words older than stone, his voice cracking with age and power. Lucien stepped forward, torn between love and ruin, shouting, "I can end this, let me." Kaelen's shifting form flickered, indecision writ on his face. Destiny had gathered them all, and the storm was ready to consume. Selene's voice broke free, sharp and trembling, her song splitting the storm in half. The air vibrated with power, the sea bowing to her call. Adrian's voice joined hers, the harmony trembling with both fear and devotion. Dorian staggered, shadows clawing at his face as he screamed, "No! Her voice is mine!" Elias shouted, "The bond is breaking! Hold on!" Lucien dropped to his knees, torn by agony as memories of his own fall burned like fire. Kaelen's voice shifted, uncertain. "If you break the chain, what remains of us?" The cliffs shook, the sky tearing with light, and Selene realized each note was not only freedom, it was sacrifice made flesh. The storm reached its zenith, lightning carving the sky into burning scars. Selene's body shook violently, her song nearly tearing her apart. Adrian held her steady, his voice growing stronger as he declared, "If this curse takes her, it takes me too." Dorian roared with fury, darkness whipping around him like 1,000 blades. Elias cried out, his staff blazing as he drove it into the earth. The bond is sealed in love and death. Lucien lunged forward, caught between saving and destroying, his scream torn from his soul. Kaelen's face shifted into anguish, no longer certain where he belonged. Every heart was laid bare, every secret revealed, as destiny demanded blood. The cliffs cracked, stone splitting as waves devoured the edges. Selene's song faltered, her strength draining as the curse resisted, clinging like chains of fire. Adrian pressed his forehead to hers, whispering fiercely, "You are not alone." Their voices fused, harmony erupting with light that blinded even the sea. Dorian screamed, clawing at his chest as shadows tore free, his body unraveling into the storm. Elias cried, "It is working." Lucien staggered back, face twisted in anguish as he whispered, "She chooses him, not me." Kaelen lowered his gaze, voice trembling with something close to regret. Selene's body swayed dangerously, power bleeding from her with every heartbeat. The final note tore from Selene's throat, a cry of pain and love entwined. Adrian's voice carried it, binding her to him, defying fate itself. The storm collapsed inward, waves falling still, silence spreading like glass shattering. Dorian's scream faded, swallowed by nothingness as his cloak scattered into ash. Elias fell forward, clutching his chest, whispering, "The curse is undone." Lucien dropped his sword, eyes hollow, the truth breaking him more than chains ever could. Kaelen's face stilled, his shifting halted by the weight of what he had witnessed. Selene collapsed into Adrian's arms, her body trembling, eyes wet with both relief and sorrow. The climax had ended, but the cost was yet to be revealed. The sea quieted, waves smoothing into glass as dawn broke across the horizon. Selene's body trembled in Adrian's arms, her voice spent, her song reduced to silence. Elias leaned heavily on his staff, whispering, "Every curse leaves scars." Lucien staggered, his face hollow, torn between envy and sorrow. Kaelen stood at the edge, his shifting features still for once, shadowed eyes betraying regret. Adrian whispered fiercely, "You're still here, Selene. You chose love." Her gaze lifted weakly, silver eyes filled with both grief and relief. The silence that followed was not peace, but fragile survival. The storm had passed, yet the memory of it would never leave their hearts. Elias's voice broke the silence, heavy with sorrow. "The curse is broken, but the cost remains." He turned toward the sea, its stillness a reminder of sacrifice. Adrian's hand tightened around Selene's, steady, unwilling to let her fade. Lucien lowered his head, whispering, "I was the first to fail her, and still I remain." Kaelen exhaled sharply, his tone low. "Perhaps curses do not vanish, only change form." Selene's breath trembled, her body frail, but her heart beat steady in defiance. The dawn stretched across the waves, light fighting shadows that still lingered. Each of them knew the battle was won, yet none believed it was truly over. Selene forced herself upright, though weakness threatened to drag her down. She touched Adrian's face, whispering, "You broke chains that no storm could." His eyes burned with unshed tears as he answered, "I would break them 1,000 times more." Elias closed his eyes, hearing echoes of prophecy undone, unsure whether this was salvation or rebellion. Lucien stepped back, sorrow, a weight too heavy to bear. whispering her name like a ghost. Kaelen's smirk returned faintly, though his gaze carried weariness. Selene turned her face to the horizon, her heart caught between the ache of survival and the fragile bloom of freedom. The curse was gone, but destiny lingered like a shadow. The sea whispered softly now, no longer a master but a mirror. Selene stepped into the tide, the water cool against her skin, no chains pulling her beneath. Adrian followed, his hands steady at her side, whispering, "Where you go, I go." Elias turned away, his face lined with exhaustion, murmuring, "The ocean has no mercy for those who defy it." Lucien's figure blurred in mist as he walked into shadow, carrying his regret like armor. Kaelen lingered at the edge, his voice soft. Perhaps freedom is the cruelest gift. Selene closed her eyes, her chest rising with fragile hope. For the first time, she stood in the sea as its equal, not its prisoner. The horizon blazed with light, waves glittering like shards of crystal. Selene lifted her gaze, whispering, "Love is the song no curse can silence." Adrian's arms circled her, steady and unyielding, his lips brushing her hair as he murmured, "Then let the world hear it." Elias's staff dimmed, its glow fading into silence. Lucien's shadow vanished beyond sight, his sorrow echoing like a distant tide. Kaelen disappeared into mist, his role unfinished but bound to return. The sea stretched endless, no longer a cage but a canvas. Selene closed her eyes, her heart fragile yet free, and the world seemed to pause. In that final breath, love stood eternal, daring destiny itself to remember her song.